Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Dr. Neville. This is my live Q&A. We're going to be talking about everything adrenal fatigue and surrounding adrenal fatigue. And there's an awful lot surrounding adrenal fatigue for sure. There's a whole lot of misunderstanding about what that condition is, and we'll probably get into a bunch of it at this point. Again, I'm Dr. Andrew Neville, and if you think of anybody that would benefit from any of this information, by all means, like and share and check out our YouTube channel and subscribe, and also Instagram. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about, I have talked about and I have done YouTube videos on, so I might refer to that. There's not a lot of fluff on that YouTube video channel. It's really kind of all the stuff that is really pertinent to what people need to know to understand what's going on, and of course then to try to be able to work through some of these secondary and tertiary conditions, understanding symptoms, all that kind of stuff. Okay, without further ado, I'm just going to jump in because I've got a ton of questions, which is awesome, and I thank you for those questions. And you can submit questions. I've got my care team is working comments and checking things out. So here we go. Welcome. Okay, Sherry says, falling asleep is fine, but how do I get back to sleep if I wake up after only 3 hours of sleep and can't get back to sleep for several hours or not at all? Okay, so the neurobiology of sleep is actually incredibly complex. There are multiple reasons as to why patients they'll have trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep. And just about all of those multiple reasons are connected to this adrenal fatigue thing. Now, what you want to remember, and I would, again, send you back to my YouTube channel and some of the stuff that I've written, adrenal fatigue is not just adrenal fatigue. It's a problem or a dysfunction within your entire stress response system, which includes the limbic system in the brain. And it's actually that limbic system in the brain that is the initiator of our sleep architecture, right? But there's other reasons, right? There's cortisol reasons, there's blood sugar reasons. One of the biggest problems with sleep, especially when people are waking, is the blood sugar issue. So from the adrenals release cortisol. Cortisol's main job is to raise our blood sugar if it ever drops, right? Like if we were to skip a meal or something like that, right? So when that happens, we skip a meal, our blood sugar drops. The limbic system triggers the HPA axis. The adrenals release cortisol. Cortisol goes to the liver, tells the liver to release a stored form of sugar back into the blood so you don't go slipping into a hypoglycemic coma or something, which is bad and evidently stressful. So that's a stress every time that happens. It's especially true at night. You know, no matter when somebody eats in the evening, right? If they, have dinner, or even if they're doing real well and they have a snack before bed, which I recommend all my patients to do, your blood sugar will drop at night. 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours later, it's going to drop. That happens for everybody. For most people, that's a minor stress. We generate a minor response, and we sleep right through it. Not a problem. My patients with adrenal fatigue, we make mountains out of molehills, right? So it might be a minor stress, but all of a sudden we generate a major response like a tiger just jumped out at us just because our blood sugar dropped. It's not the only reason people wake up, but it's a key one. So the key is snack before bed. It's a hypoglycemic diet throughout the day. Small, frequent meals, more protein and fat, low sugar and carb. Control that throughout the day, right? But then make sure you're getting that snack before bed. That really is crucial. Just like grandma always used to say, you want to have a warm glass of milk before bed, and it would work, right? It would help people to sleep because milk has protein and fat. At least it used to have fat. So you can find the milk with fat in it now. Protein and fat helps to stabilize that sugar, can help us to sleep. So that is a key thing. If you can't do dairy, just do a couple bites of dinner or some nut butter or something with some protein and fat. Animal protein and fat seems to do a little better. It's a whole lot better, just so you know, it's a whole lot better to prevent the waking at night than to try to deal with it once it's already there. That's the key. Like once you've already woken up, you've already dumped a bunch of stress hormone, whatever that is. You can't just get rid of that, right? You've got to wait for your body to metabolize that out. So the hypoglycemic diet's important, and there's some other ways to work with the sleep. And what should happen over time is that, we're not going to snap our fingers. There's not some magic pill to give you to just help you to sleep. It's about fixing kind of all these variables that are messing with your sleep, fixing all of those, and then over time, the sleep gradually it gets better and better and better. Okay. Tashina says, can I ask why vitamin C? Well, you can ask whatever you want. Hopefully I'll have the answer. What is the explanation for recommendation of vitamin C? How much vitamin C does he recommend for a teenager with adrenal fatigue? And he mentioned in a previous Q&A that antioxidants are good for adrenal fatigue patients. Do I have a favorite one or two that I could recommend? Thanks. You're welcome. Okay, so vitamin C. Vitamin C, chemically, is ascorbic acid. It's one of the most basic molecules in the body. It's actually really similar to glucose. Glucose is just this ring, benzene ring. Ascorbic acid is like one enzyme shift or change away from glucose. A very basic chemical. Turns out humans are one of the only mammals that cannot make ascorbic acid on demand. And that's interesting, right? It's humans and primates. Guinea pigs can't do it, in some sort of fruit bat. Like, we're the only mammals that can't make ascorbic acid on demand, which is interesting. Other mammals that can make ascorbic acid, again, which is vitamin C, they make it when they're stressed. So when you stress one of these other mammals, they will release a bunch of stress hormone. Well, they dump a bunch of ascorbic acid as well, primarily because ascorbic acid is really the main antioxidant that kind of mops up after the damage that all that extra stress hormone will cause. And this is what leads to a lot of the symptoms that we associate with adrenal fatigue, is basically the metabolic exhaust of fighting tigers all the time, which is free radicals, which we talk about in terms of oxidative stress, which means we deplete our antioxidant status, right? So vitamin C, aka ascorbic acid, is incredibly important. Just about every one of my patients needs it, and we need good doses, right? So I will sometimes really max out that dose. There's no toxicity levels for vitamin C. It's incredibly safe. Plain old ascorbic acid works just fine. You'll hear me interchange those names. Ascorbic acid, vitamin C, it's the same. You don't need some fancy Whole Foods vitamin C. That is not a thing. There's no science to really back that up. Which antioxidants are my favorites? Well, vitamin C is certainly one of them. It's one of the basics. My patients, I recommend cod liver oil for my patients, so they get vitamin A as well, some of these fat-soluble vitamins, so that's one bit. My favorite antioxidant is probably resveratrol. Resveratrol is it's an antioxidant that exists in food, like dark red and dark blue, purple berries and fruits, vegetables, things like that. Red wine, right? That's why people say that, red wine is good for you. It's good for me. I'm going to keep drinking my red wine. Well, it's not horrible for you, but like you'd have to drink a whole lot of red wine to get a therapeutic dose of resveratrol. That would be bad for you for sure. But resveratrol is one of the big ones. It's one of the best. So vitamin C, it's a piece, right? It's a piece. What you want to remember is that adrenal fatigue is more than adrenal fatigue. It's a problem with the whole stress response system, not just the adrenals. But vitamin C is a piece of that, what I call that therapeutic puzzle for everybody. Okay, Jennifer says, can you talk about high fasting insulin in adrenal fatigue, specifically high cortisol? Yeah. So they tend to go together, right? So what we have to remember is what does cortisol do, right? Cortisol is the main stress hormone in the body. Its main job is to control blood sugar. It's also an anti-inflammatory and does some different immunological things. But cortisol raises your blood sugar in two instances. I already talked about one, which is where if your blood sugar dropped, like if somebody convinced you to do intermittent fasting, which for people with adrenal problems is not a good idea, you're going to skip a meal. You're not going to eat breakfast. You're only going to eat in this 48-hour window or whatever. every hour that you're not eating, you're stressing your adrenals, because your adrenals have to have the job of keeping your blood sugar up, because if you dip into a hypoglycemic coma, that's bad. So you're stressing your adrenals. So cortisol will raise your sugar if your blood sugar drops. That's the first mechanism. Or if you trigger your adrenals because you're stressed in any way, because when you're stressed, our stress response system responds and thinks there must be a tiger and you need fuel. And you can't go wait, to eat a ham sandwich, get fuel, and then deal with the tiger. You'd already be lunch, right? So you need fuel right away. So stress the adrenals, they release cortisol. Cortisol tells the body, release a stored form of sugar so you can use energy to fight. So that's what raises your cortisol. That's what raises your glucose or sugar. Now let's go to insulin, right? So cortisol's job is to raise sugar in the blood, partially. Insulin's job is to get sugar out of the blood. That's primarily what it does, right? So they kind of work with one another, right? But they have different purposes. So insulin's job is to take that sugar, right, that it finds in the blood, escort it to the cell, bring it to the cell, open the door of the cell, put it in the cell, get that sugar out of the blood into the cell. Now the cells, they don't need that much sugar, actually, right? And they can fill up. And when they fill up, they begin kind of holding the door shut from the inside, right? And they start becoming resistant to the insulin. Now it takes more and more insulin in the blood to be able to pry open that door, get that sugar. Insulin's job is to get that sugar out of the blood, right? And eventually the door is just held shut. Insulin it still has to get the sugar out of the blood. So what does it do? It can't get it into the cell, so it turns it into a fat and sticks it somewhere for energy so that we can use it later, usually on our hips or thighs or abdomen or glutes or wherever it may be, right? So we start gaining weight, we start developing insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and that's all pre-diabetes kind of stuff. So all that stuff goes hand in hand, high insulin, high cortisol, higher sugars. Figure out what's going on with regard to the adrenals, and not just the adrenals, but the whole stress response system itself. You fix that, and all that other stuff goes away, right? So blood sugar control is really integral as far as successfully treating those with adrenal fatigue. Okay, Debbie says, why do I recommend cod liver oil? Great question. Well, I just mentioned one reason, because cod liver oil has vitamin A. So cod liver oil is oil from the cod's liver, right? The primary thing that it has these omega-3 fatty acids, right? And omega-3 fatty acids have ridiculous amounts of research as far as health benefits. For just about every condition you test omega-3s against, it helps to reduce the risk of morbidity and mortality. I mean, it's fascinating. It's one of the only substances out there that does that. That's the omega-3s. Now, you can get omega-3s in flaxseed oil, right? Or fish oils, things like that. Why cod liver oil? Well, I like fish oil or cod liver oil over flaxseed oil because they have more omega-3s. Flaxseed oil has some omega-3s, but it's also got a bunch of omega-6s. And we're trying to reverse this ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, which should be about 1-to-1, 2-to-1 maybe, right? 6-to-3. But in our standard American diet is more like 16-to-1. Way too many omega-6s, way too little omega-3s. So we need to reverse that. So I just want to stack as much omega-3 in our favor as much as possible. Fish oil or cod liver oil does that. Now, why cod liver oil over fish oil is because cod liver oil has fat-soluble vitamins in it that fish oil doesn't have. Fish oil has the fats, but cod liver oil has vitamin A and vitamin D. Those vitamins are incredibly deficient in our diet, but also incredibly important in orchestrating normal cellular processes like healing, right? Just healing and repair. The one that we use also has vitamin K in it. And you'll notice, right, vitamin D, a lot of people are talking about for 10, 15 years, people have been talking about this. And we've got all this research. Even conventional medicine is now kind of testing people for vitamin D reluctantly. If we waited another 20 years, we'd get all the same research for vitamin A, right? And conventional medicine would come along. And if we waited another 20 years, vitamin K research would come about as well. But these vitamins, they actually work more like hormones. They are all incredibly deficient. They're all incredibly important. And, you know, we need them all. So I just load them up. I'm not going to wait for the research. Let's just utilize them as best we can. So cod liver oil, again, is a piece of that puzzle. Now, I mentioned vitamin C, a piece of this therapeutic puzzle. I mentioned cod liver oil. What I don't want you to hear from that is that supplements fix all this stuff, because they don't. Supplements are just that. They are supplementary, right? But they're supplementary to a whole lot of work at a more basic kind of foundational level. It's not that I don't use supplements. I mean, I do need to use supplements. There's some stuff that's broken. There's some stuff that's deficient. Antioxidants. I mean, we got to heal the limbic system. We got to tweak some hormones. I mean, there's pills that my patients have to pop. But that alone does not get people better from this condition. It's a combination of things, from lifestyle factors, which I hope we get to talk about, lifestyle factors, dietary factors, and of course, you know, vitamin, mineral, herb, things like that. So, but not only supplements. I'm just answering the questions as they've been given to me. Okay. Okay, Misha Ann says, so paying more for liposomal vitamin C is not necessary. Not for most people. Liposomal vitamin C is a fat-soluble form of vitamin C. And in some people, especially patients who don't absorb vitamin C, so if you take too much vitamin C, it can loosen your stools or make your stomach upset. And for most people, that's pretty well tolerated. 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, they'll tolerate just fine. Fine. You absorb it, it works fine. Vitamin C is vitamin C. It doesn't have to be fancy. So for some people in my practice, it's rare, but sometimes they actually don't tolerate any vitamin C in their gut. So using a liposomal C, fat soluble, you can put it in your mouth. It absorbs through the mucosal lining in the mouth. It absorbs right in, bypasses the digestion. We can then get somebody's vitamin C up even though their bowels don't tolerate it. But for the vast majority of the people, you don't have to spend all that money. Linus Pauling did all the most brilliant work on vitamin C, Nobel Prize, the whole thing. He used the cheapest form of vitamin C, this plain old ascorbic acid, the cheapest stuff you could get, and all the research is profound. So no, fancy stuff is not necessary. You know, a lot of people are out there to sell a bunch of supplements. I mean, that's kind of what they do. Okay, Carrie Lynn says, why do some people have such a reaction to taking supplements, and how can we get better able to take them? Thank you. Yeah, so Dr. Posnecker, my predecessor here, who did this 30 years, right? I've been doing this 20 years, working with only patients with adrenal fatigue. He did it for 30 years prior to me coming on board. He said that if you could describe people with adrenal problems with one word, that word would have to be sensitive. And he's right. My patients tend to be sensitive on just about every level you can think about, right? Whether they're sensitive to their environment, right? Sensitive to senses, become sensitized, right? Sensitive to bright lights and loud sounds and harsh chemicals and smells, even touch, right? Everything is on red alert, but even just more caring and sensitive in general, right? Sensitive to the trials and tribulations of other people, all that kind of stuff, but also sensitive from an allergic standpoint and a sensitivity standpoint, just kind of sensitive to certain supplements. Some of my patients, it's rare, but I have had a handful of patients that could not take a single supplement that we've tried to use, which means we just have to focus more on that kind of lifestyle, dietary, and some other modalities to fill in the pieces of that puzzle. For the vast majority of my patients, you can find things that have, things that work, right? Maybe it's low doses, Maybe it's something that's an alternative to one other thing, right? But you generally can find things that work for different people. And as the physiology, right, somebody with adrenal fatigue is kind of stuck in stress physiology, creating the sensitization. As you shift this little by little, people become less and less sensitive, and they can tolerate more and more stuff, more and more of their environment, more and more of their family and other stresses, but also more and more supplementation, so you can kind of then get on board with strengthening treatment once we get that physiology to shift. So, Carrie Lynn, hang in there. You can get better. Even if you can't take any supplements, you can still get better, as long as you have somebody that kind of knows what they're doing and how to guide you. But you don't have to. But usually you can get things in, and even if it's low doses, enough of a variety of things can help this system to shift. But sensitivity is really the name of the game, and it goes back to one of the primary things is a sensitization of this limbic system in the brain. And that limbic system in the brain is it's an interesting part of the brain. It's not a thinking part of our brain. It's a reacting part of our brain. But it's constantly assessing our environment. It's assessing our external environment, right? Through senses and perception, receiving that information. It's assessing our internal environment with chemicals in the blood supply, receiving that information. And when it does, it has to react. Is this stimulus stressful? Harmful, dangerous? Like, can this thing kill me? Do I have to jump this body into fight or flight, stress physiology, hormones, nerves, cortisol, adrenal, and all that stuff, right? Or is that stimulus harmless, innocuous, and I can just kind of chill out in vacation mode and just sit back and let it pass? With a bit of a genetic predisposition, enough chronic stress over time of any kind, altogether, enough chronic stress to overwhelm that system, that limbic system starts to get trigger happy. So we start to get jumpy, reactive, sensitized to our environment, to everything, right? So calming that limbic system is certainly another one of those pieces of that therapeutic puzzle. Okay, let's see. So Charlotte says, can low cortisol go to high cortisol in 6 months, and why? What do you think about it? Is it an adrenal thing? Well, it's going to be an adrenal thing because your adrenals release cortisol, right? So absolutely, it's an adrenal thing. The term adrenal fatigue is not a great term, in my opinion. I used to call it adrenal dysfunction, right? Because in the early stages, you can actually have too much cortisol, right? Too much stress hormone. Well, that's not necessarily a fatiguing situation. It's more of a dysfunctional situation. Later stages, definitely those cortisols can drop down. But in the middle stages, those levels bounce around. The thing is, you're asking, is it an adrenal thing? Yes. Is it only an adrenal thing? No. The adrenals are part of the problem because they release the cortisol and adrenaline. And I give that hormone a bad rap all the time because of all the damage it causes, but it's life-saving. Like, we wouldn't be here. We have to have that hormone. Just don't want too much, and you definitely don't want too little. But the adrenals don't decide whether or not to release that hormone or not. So whenever there's an adrenal problem, there has got to be a problem with whoever yells at your adrenals. So if we go up the chain of command, so to speak, we get into the brain. There are two master endocrine glands in the brain that work together, the hypothalamus and the pituitary. The hypothalamus pituitary control your adrenals, your thyroid, and your ovaries, or testes. And I'll tell you, if your adrenals go south, they will definitely drag down those other two as well. So this makes up what we call your HPA axis, right? So if there's an adrenal problem, you're bouncing around. High cortisol, low cortisol, high cortisol, low cortisol. There's also a problem with your pituitary hypothalamus. But it doesn't even stop there because it's the limbic system right above that I just talked about, that part of your brain, which is like the puppet master, right? Like a marionette, right? That's kind of keeping us sensitized, trigger happy, in fight or flight, that kind of a thing. So what you have to do, right, to successfully treat that high cortisol, low cortisol, whatever it is, you have to work on treating the entire stress response system itself. That's where success comes from, treating that entire stress response system. Good luck. Okay, Laureen says, what about the vagus nerve? How do we heal that? Well, you should heal that for sure, Laureen. Your stress response system, and what anybody who's got adrenal fatigue, adrenal dysfunction, whatever it is, really has a stress response system dysfunction, which is threefold. The limbic system in the brain, the hormone side of your stress response, that's your adrenals, and then the nerve side of your stress response. Well, that nerve side of your stress response is what we refer to as the autonomic nervous system. And you can think of autonomic as automatic. I don't know why they didn't just call it that, but it's medicine. We try to confuse people. Anyway, in a simple way, there's basically two nerves coming from the brain going to every organ. One of those nerves is your fight or flight nerve, right? Stress physiology, speed up the heart kind of stuff. And the other nerve is the opposite. Rest and digest, vacation mode, kind of slow down the heart kind of stuff. These nerves, the old school terms, sympathetic versus parasympathetic, not important. They oppose one another physiologically, right? You can only turn one on at any one time for the most part. So, when the proverbial tiger jumps out at us, we want to react, right? And we need those nerves to get there because nerves happen right away. Hormones might take a few minutes, and again, you'd already be a goner, right? So the nerves kick in, the hormones follow, we turn on our heart and our lungs and our sugar metabolism, all that stuff. Anyway, you do that enough, you're going to get trigger happy, you're going to get stuck in fight or flight, overactivating sympathetic nervous system, suppressing parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. Laureen's asking about the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the main parasympathetic nerve in our body, which primarily governs our gut, some other things, but our gut, the whole thing, right? Mouth to anus, everything. I'm talking sphincters opening and closing. I'm talking hydrochloric acid, pancreatic function, gallbladder function, peristalsis, salivary glands, you name it. Turning on that vagus nerve is another piece of that therapeutic puzzle for everybody. Everybody. So, certainly all of my patients, and I've talked about this, I think, in some of my videos where, we want to turn on that vagus nerve as much as possible. We want to do everything we can, really, to shift this physiology, right? There are some ideas that people utilize to turn on the vagus nerve. Nature is a great one to turn on the vagus nerve, and anything, joy and beauty and awe, believe it or not. The experience of awe turns on the vagus nerve. There's even some devices to turn on the vagus nerve. One of my favorites is something called savoring. And this has all been researched. There's a guy named Stephen Porges that created this polyvagal theory. Great information about the vagus nerve. And you'll have experts, right, talk about different bits of the stress response system. Like, I specialize in the adrenals. You got to do the diet and vitamin C and blah, blah. Yeah, that's right, but not only. And then you'll have Stephen Porges talks about the vagus nerve, and you got to, it's a dysautonomia, things are out of balance. And yeah, you're right too, but not only, right? And then you'll have people specializing in the limbic system. We can do these MRI patterns and we see these brainwave patterns. That's your problem. Yeah, but not only. What I've found is that when you treat all this stuff together, which you absolutely can and should, when you treat this stuff together, you can really get people back on their feet in a significant way. So anyway, vagus nerve, savoring quickly, is the idea of thinking of something good, positive, safe, some positive experience, and really going there. Really savoring that experience, going there with all of your senses, really experiencing it, which ends up shifting this physiology, which is important because most of you will know this. When there's trauma, right, that imprints in our limbic system in a really deep way, and our limbic system is really good at doing that and protecting us just in case something like that happens again. We want to be able to jump into fight or flight. Well, we got to, we all have too much experience with that stuff, unfortunately, so we've got to kind of engage in the opposite. So this idea of savoring is a pretty cool thing. Okay, so Mary says, my estrogen has been tested as being low. The bladder is very sensitive, making traveling almost impossible. Is there an adrenal connection? Maybe. I mean, what we do know, specifically, physiologically, is that when the body is in a stress response, that excess cortisol, your main stress hormone, goes to the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian hormone axis and suppresses it. It does that on purpose, right? In fact, when we're in stress physiology, there's 4 main organs that get suppressed: immune, digestive, reproductive, and thyroid. And we know that. That's conventional physiology. The body does it on purpose. Makes sense, too. Like, you don't want to waste energy healing some inflammatory process or fighting some chronic infection. There's a tiger, right? Forget about that. Deal with the tiger. Same thing with the gut. Shut it down. Vagus nerve, whatever. Don't waste energy digesting, absorbing. Don't really want you to have a bowel movement right now. Again, there's a tiger, right? Same thing with ovarian hormones, testicular hormones. Shut them down. Don't care about your periods. Don't care about your sex life. Don't really want you to procreate right now. There's a tiger, right? You'll both be dead. So just about all my female patients with adrenal problems have problems with estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, right? So getting to the why is really a key bit. Now, bladder being sensitive and all, it's hard to say, right? There is a phenomenon with regard to the mucosal membranes in the body getting damaged from stress hormone over time. You know, for years we've talked about the connection with stress and ulcers, and it's there's a connection for sure. What happens is when you were dumping excess cortisol and adrenal and stress hormone, that hormone goes to the mucous membranes and actually damages the mucin lining, that protective lining over top of that delicate mucosal membrane. That could happen in the gut, and when that happens, you develop some diffuse gastritis or ulceration if it coalesces. But that can also happen in the respiratory mucosal membranes, even the genital urinary mucosal membranes. So trying to replenish that mucin membrane is something that's helpful, but you can take all kinds of fancy things to support your mucosal linings and all that, right? And there's plenty of people that'll sell you all kinds of fancy supplements. But if this is a problem and you don't fix this physiology, right? It's like you're bailing a boat, right? But you haven't plugged the leak. So to me, those are more secondary dysfunctions. Not that I'm against, like, if somebody wanted to give you estrogen, that's fine, but I would figure out, why is my estrogen low, right? And if you're postmenopausal, yes, your estrogen should be low, but not non-existent, right? And if you have signs and symptoms that women have of estrogen that's too low, right? That's the problem, too low. I mean, a 56-year-old woman shouldn't have an estrogen that a 20-year-old woman should have, right? But it should be there a little bit, like not totally gone. If there's symptoms of too low estrogen too, then like, flashes or vaginal dryness or weakened membranes, things like that, then, it makes sense to look into this cortisol thing, this adrenal issue. Okay. Michelle says, I have 24/7 off balance and lightheaded with sometimes hand, feet cold, and it's a big impact on my daily life. How long does it take for the adrenals to heal? Okay, so I'm not sure if those are connected necessarily. So there's a lot of different reasons as to why my patients will be wobbly. I think I've said this on these calls. I would refer to my patients as weebles sometimes, and I'm probably dating myself, but the old commercial is weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. My patients are wobbly, right? They are lightheaded sometimes, right? Stand up too quick, we can get lightheaded. But there's some balance issues. A lot of that is blood flow to the brain. The blood flow to the brain is managed by our blood volume, which is an adrenal thing having to do with the adrenals helping us to hold on to salt, which means we get to hold on to water, right? And in the body, water follows salt, right? So here, follow my logic, right? So if the adrenals are weak and you can't hold on to salt, you can't hold on to water. That's why my patients will urinate more frequently than the average person. Not always, but sometimes. And that will also compromise blood volume. Blood volume is mostly water. So now if the blood volume's low, we can get lightheaded when we stand up too quick. Sometimes that means lowered blood pressure in the beginning, usually low. The blood pressure can go up at some point. There's also an autonomic nervous system side of keeping blood in our brain as well. Well, both are going to be compromised with, adrenal fatigue. So what I do with my patients is, work on those various aspects, right? Let's make sure the salt is up, right? Make sure we're supporting that aldosterone-like effect from the adrenals. There are certain supplements and herbs that you could potentially use to help to support that as well. Make sure we're doing what we can for the nerves in the brain that also govern, proprioception and the understanding of the brain as far as, where I am in space, right? So that if there's no room spinning stuff. As far as how long does it take for the adrenals to heal? I mean, it's a dangerous question, right? It varies for so many people. Depends. It depends on how good can my patients be at scooping out the stress or demand in their life, right? Not emptying the bucket. Nobody is asking for that. That's not a realistic possibility, but paying attention to some stresses, some demands, right? Or paying attention to, how good am I at controlling my what my brain does, right? Like thinking about, worrying about things I have no control over, right? Or how good can I be at controlling my diet, right? And working on the blood sugar. How good can I be at, popping a couple supplements? How good can I be at doing a relaxation exercise consistently, which is essential. Essential. I mean, this is a central piece of this puzzle. When I've got this this kind of Jumpstart program that I created to kind of talk about these essential pieces, central pieces. Not the only pieces, of course. There's a lot to this, which you're getting now, but some form of a consistent relaxation exercise that is mind focusing your mind on one thing is key. Because what that does is it starts to heal the limbic system, rewires it. I mean, I've seen research that shows that, with models where you put, so it's a rat model, when you put a rat under chronic, unpredictable, mild stress, which is a thing, that's how they basically give rats adrenal fatigue and then test them and see what happens. You put them under chronic, unpredictable, mild stress, which kind of feels like I'm a rat sometimes in today's society, right? They have hippocampal atrophy in their brain, which is a part of the limbic system, controls sleep and some other things. But they've also done human studies, not a rat study. Not sure how you get a rat to do mindfulness, but human studies, 6 weeks of a mindfulness meditation course, and all of a sudden you'll see increases in hippocampal volume. Literally growing and redeveloping a neural pathway away from fight or flight towards rest and digest, shifting this physiology, right? Now that bit that that's easily one of the hardest things for most of my patients to do. So we do a lot of work on, well, try this and do this other thing, and this is how you do it, and this is your expectation and all that. So it's a lot of these pieces of the puzzle together. So hang in there, you can heal. It's never quite as quick as any of us want it to be, but it should be kind of incremental over time. Good luck. Lana says, I'm wondering about mold toxicity. What type of test do you recommend? Blood, urine, do you have a certain brand? I don't. I mean, I tend to treat mold like just about every other stressor in life. We all have a certain size bucket of tolerance to stress, right? Some small, some big. Half from mom, half from dad genetically. I mean, you can overwhelm anybody's bucket, right, if you throw enough at them. But this bucket wasn't really designed for the kind of stress we have today, right? It was designed for old school stress, like hardship, famine, plague or a predator or something, right? That bucket would fill up all at once. We jump into fight or flight and deal with it, hopefully. And then if we live, right, the bucket would drain. We shift out of fight or flight, so we turn off the wear and tear, turn on the healing and repair, and we live to fight another day. We don't have stress like that these days, most of us. These days, we're filling up this bucket left and right. And any and all stress, it's only one stress response system, but all this stress kind of goes into the same bucket. And we have research, even from the father of stress research, Hans Selye, when he stressed his rats, he stressed them in a variety of ways: physical, mental, emotional, social stresses, exercise challenge stresses, and surgeries and viruses and things like that. When he would stress them, they would all get sick in a similar way. So the concept is there's this one bucket, right? And it's easy to try to chase after any one thing in this bucket. Like mold toxicity is a big one too. But so too is, mercury toxicity, or you have Lyme, or you have Candida, or you have Epstein-Barr, or you have, whatever it might be, right? People chase after that one thing. And there's stories, anecdotal stories of people who will write, well, I got my mercury tested and my amalgam's out and I detoxed and I never got sick again. Okay, maybe that's true. Maybe that is a person whose bucket was 50% full of mercury and then nothing else was in that bucket. That's great, right? They're going to do fine. You just emptied the bucket. I have never seen that patient in my office. Now, maybe it's a self-selecting group, right? Maybe those people get better and I don't see them. Maybe I see the people, so it's a biased group, the people who have kind of failed those therapies. But in my experience, and mold would be the same thing, in my experience, this bucket is full of layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, right? And chasing after these things is easy for doctors to do. It's easy for us to think about too, like, okay, you're sick because you have Candida, right? That's causing your problem. Okay, well, if I kill Candida, I'll feel better, right? It's just a little too simplistic, unfortunately. And the thing is, mold is everywhere, right? So my question is always, so if you and I walk into a mold-infested building or whatever, like, why do you react so adversely and I don't, right? The variable is not the mold, the variable is you, right? So what's the variable? Okay, it's an immune system thing. Right? Your immune system is overreacting to that mold, causing more of a problem. Fair? Why? Like, what's up with your immune system? Well, one of the biggest controllers of your immune reactivity goes back to your adrenals. Right? The immune system behaves very specifically when we hit it with stress hormone. It becomes suppressed on one side and overactive on the other side. Now, technically, they call this a Th1 to Th2 shift in the literature. That Th1 side is the side of the immune system that fights infection. That side kind of gets suppressed, which is why all my patients are vulnerable to chronic infections, chronic sinus, Candida, Epstein-Barr, Lyme, long COVID. All that stuff comes about because of that. Whereas the other side of the immune system gets upregulated, now we start to increase antibody reactions, histamine reactions to things, right? So we develop allergies, environmental allergies, food allergies, asthma, even autoimmune disease, but just increased reactivity, eczema, histamine, hives, things like that. So in general, I dig a little deeper and kind of go after that. Now, I'm not saying that hanging out, if you have a mold-infested house, hanging out in a mold-infested house is a good idea. It's not. It's not a good idea. But I don't go crazy chasing after mold. That's just been my experience. So I don't have any kind of specific labs or anything. The guy that, oh boy, am I going to remember his name? There's one guy, he's famous, that does the mold stuff, and the name kind of escapes me. If it comes out, I'll try to throw it in the comments. Shoemaker, Richie Shoemaker, he does the most. But again, he blames everything on mold. Mold toxicity is a problem for everybody. And I'm not saying it's not. You don't want to be exposed to mold chronically, right? But vast majority of the time, it's a deeper problem. Okay, is there a connection? Is there a correlation between adrenal fatigue and mast cell activation syndrome, which is kind of just an extension of what I was just saying? When our physiology is here, right? Too much fight or flight, that stress hormone hits the immune system, causes this overreactivity, and part of that is the mast cells. So mast cells are part of the immune system. The mast cells are what release histamine, right? So it's pretty much an assumption in my practice that all my patients have some degree of mast cell disorder. You can call it mast cell activation syndrome, or there are other kind of official designations. I don't really care what you call it. It's basically you're dumping too much histamine, but why? That's always my question, right? And I'll drive my patients and some doctors a little crazy too, because I'm always asking why. Okay, so I've got all these histamine problems, but why, right? Now, histamine's an issue, and it's not like I ignore histamine. I do pay some attention to histamine because it does help if we can kind of knock that down. But the problem is at a deeper level. The problem is that shift in the immune system. But again, I can throw fancy herbs and mushrooms and different things at the immune system, try to get that Th1, Th2 system to shift. But you got to remember that immune system is just doing as it's told by the stress hormone. It's being told to do that. So chasing after the immune, the digestive, the reproductive, the thyroid, chasing after those systems and those dysfunctions while your body is purposely suppressing them, I mean, it's like pushing a car that has the parking brake engaged. You get enough behind it, you'll get her to go a little bit, but you'll have to do that forever. And it's a whole lot easier just to release this brake. A lot easier, a lot longer lasting. Over time, a lot less effort, right? Release the brake, stop suppressing those organs, and those things can go away. I've seen it with autoimmune disease, with allergies. I mean, give it a couple seasons, I've seen environmental allergies go away. It's not that I ignore it, right? When I work with patients, there's two tests I run on just about every patient. One is saliva testing for, to get an insight on the adrenals. And the other test is food allergy testing. Because if I can identify and deal with those, it helps people to get better faster. Because it's kind of a controllable stress, right? Every time I eat gluten or whatever, that's in my bucket. Well, I can only control so many things in my bucket. Theoretically, I can control what I put on my fork. So let's deal with that, right? Let's at least scoop that out. But if we don't fix this underlying physiology, right, which is the suppressed immune and digestive system together creating the food allergies, people just keep losing foods, right? You'll get allergic to the new foods you eat. I mean, I've had patients come into me, well-intentioned doctors, hey, they said I had food allergies, I dealt with those things, but now I keep losing foods. Like I've had people say, I can eat 4 things, and that's it, otherwise I react. Or doc, I can eat chicken and broccoli, and that's it. You have to fix that underlying problem. That's the big thing. Okay, let's see. Okay, so Shay says, what are the tests that will be abnormal for sure to indicate adrenal fatigue? Because my labs are normal, but I feel all the symptoms. All right, so with adrenal fatigue, if you feel the symptoms, right, and if you, like on my website, I've got a questionnaire, right? And if that questionnaire shows that you've got adrenal fatigue, I mean, chances are you've got it, right? Because this is a situation where, if your physiology is shifted here, we know what stress physiology does. It causes oxidative stress, which causes fatigue, pain, weight, insomnia, brain fog, anxiety, depression, blood sugar, blood pressure problems, and on top of that, a little immune, digestive, reproductive, thyroid, and there's other stuff, but that's, when you look at that conglomeration of symptoms together, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, chances are it's a duck. Now, the problem is the person in front of you, whoever that doctor may be, might not be testing you the right way. Again, this is recorded, but if you go back and listen to the beginning, doctors will test for, I think I talked about this, I'm not even sure, it's too many of these. Doctors will basically test the adrenals to rule out Addison's disease, which is complete failure. Chances are you do not have Addison's disease or complete adrenal failure, but you can have dysfunction. You can have a dysfunction within your adrenals, which are the same symptoms as Addison's, just not quite as severe. But they will test to rule out adrenal failure. And if your adrenals haven't failed, what they're taught is that these are fine. Your adrenals are fine. And that this adrenal fatigue thing doesn't exist. So, don't even pursue it. The right way, the way you want to test for adrenal dysfunction is with a salivary cortisol test. And there's only one lab that I use for this kind of saliva testing. The lab that's been doing it the longest. Plus, it's much more comprehensive of a test as well. So it's a little more accurate, more comprehensive, and more sensitive than some of the other tests. So salivary cortisol test, that's what you want to look for. But again, what you have to realize is that adrenal fatigue is not just adrenal fatigue. It's a problem or a dysfunction within that entire stress response system. And the reason I say that over and over again is because there's a ton of people out there who are kind of regurgitating the same old adrenal fatigue stuff. Take some vitamin C, take some ginseng, take some B5 or whatever, fix your adrenals. Yeah, I mean, it's more than that. It's more than that. Like, you have to deal with the rest of that system. I mean, I don't know, I probably can't say it anymore. So, okay, so I'm going to kind of glance through there. Let's see, I'm going to go to, I have a thyroid problem, hypothyroid, right? They keep increasing my synthroid. Is this going to continue to always increase? And just how high can it go? Well, Tina, why do you have hypothyroid? That would be my question to you and to your doctor. It's a rhetorical question, I suppose. The number one cause of hypothyroidism in this country is adrenal fatigue. Now, I didn't learn about this connection in med school. Be nice if I did, but I didn't. This is going on 10 plus years ago. I was called out west to train some doctors to treat patients with adrenal fatigue. And I knew what I wanted to say, but I've got a bit of a perfectionist streak in me as well, which gets me in trouble sometimes. So I go back to the books, I look into physiologic texts, and right there in front of me, conventional physiology. Excess cortisol goes to the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid hormone axis and suppresses it at every level it can. I mean, it's amazing. It is a comprehensive, aggressive suppression of thyroid hormone. From the hypothalamus to the pituitary, block it. Pituitary to the thyroid, block it. Production of thyroid hormone, block it. T4 to T3 conversion, block it. That cortisol even goes so far as to cause the thyroid to release an inactive form of thyroid hormone called reverse T3, right, to bind up all the receptors in the body, just in case it missed suppressing everything else. Now you have this inactive form of thyroid hormone bind everything up. That's not a problem with your thyroid. I mean, ultimately, it's a problem with your thyroid. That is a problem with the messages your thyroid is receiving. Now, the thing is, doctors will see thyroid problems and recognize thyroid problems much more easily, and they'll throw you on a bunch of thyroid. How hard is it to do that, right? Just replace the thyroid with Synthroid or Armour or some other kind of desiccated glandular thyroid, which tends to be my preference. It is almost impossible to stabilize a thyroid treatment, and certainly the thyroid problem gets worse over time if you don't deal with the underlying problem, if you don't deal with the adrenal issues. And here's the key to that. As a naturopath, I tend to believe there's wisdom in the body. I can understand why, if I was theoretically fighting a tiger, why would my body suppress my immune system? Okay, don't waste energy. My reproductive system, yeah, good, don't waste energy there. Digestion, good, no time to eat, whatever. But why the thyroid? If we think of the thyroid as the engine of your body, right? Then, which most people will accept, then why, if I'm fighting a tiger, why would I shut down that engine? Doesn't make sense. Wouldn't I need that energy, that drive, right? So I came up with this analogy that if the thyroid is the engine in your body, then the adrenals are more like the oil and gas in that engine, filling that engine. And if it knows you're overusing the oil and gas with your adrenals, chronic stress over time, the the body purposely suppresses the engine, slows down the engine, suppresses the thyroid so it doesn't burn out. Now you've got a doctor recognizes, hey, your thyroid's a little off. Let's put you on a bunch of thyroid. Let's crank up your engine. And you'll feel better temporarily, right? Could be a couple months, could be a couple years, but now you're cranking up an engine without any attention to the oil and gas in that engine. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this, that it lasts for a certain amount of time, but then people crash, sometimes worse than they were, because you basically just kind of blow out the oil and gas, right? So a lot of my work is trying to catch up the adrenal support to the thyroid support. So it's not that I'm against, thyroid hormone and thyroid treatment. It's just, there very well could be a deeper underlying cause that people are missing. So whenever there's a thyroid issue, I'm always going back to, okay, well, let's make sure the adrenals are fine. Because sometimes I'll go and treat the adrenals, right? Ignore the thyroid. Even though the thyroid's a problem, ignore that, treat the adrenals. Now we've got somebody shifting out of fight or flight. So now we're removing the suppression on the thyroid, and the thyroid kicks in and normalizes on its own. Like the thyroid was fine, it's just stopped suppressing the darn thing. So, okay, so next, mine is a general question. So John, mine is a general question, I hope others as well. When asked by a traditional medical doctor about our medical history and current medical status, how should we typically respond? Well, you probably don't want to talk about adrenal fatigue, because they'll think you're nuts. I just had that today. I was dealing with a patient who, she was actually berated, called pretty much a moron, and said that you're being an idiot, you're being taken advantage of by me, that and she's like, well, but I'm feeling better. Well, you're wasting your money. That stuff doesn't exist, but I'm feeling better. Like, this doctor was not listening to this patient in any way, shape, or form. Thankfully, we've been around each other enough. They walked out and found another doctor. I mean, and I apologized. I mean, it's shocking that that conventional medicine can have this kind of behavior and this kind of attitude towards people. But they're just, again, they're taught, right, certain things. They're going to chase after these symptoms. You have anxiety, take an anti-anxiety med. You have depression, take antidepressant. You have sleep problems, take a sleep med, right? I mean, if you're lucky enough to pick the right drug, you might cover up the symptom, right? But you haven't fixed the underlying problem. But they're chasing the symptoms. And that's okay, but you can't kind of convince yourself that you actually fix the problem in doing it that way, right? There's a deeper reason, right? So they're treating the symptoms without asking the question why. But it takes work to ask the question why. It takes work, it takes thought, and they're stuck in a bad system. That's a long question. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one. Okay, so have you had any exposure? What do we got? Okay, 2 minutes. Have you had any exposure to red light therapy in relation to mitochondrial support? Would you recommend this treatment for adrenal fatigue patients as a way to supplement for fatigue? I like the way that you put that. This is Kim. I've heard of red light therapy, and there's some research, right, that gets behind it. We would use infrared lasers when we had a bunch of patients coming in. I don't have a ton of patients coming in here anymore because I kind of try to broaden my reach. That means I can only reach the people I can get to. Mitochondria, right? The mitochondria are the energy producers in the cells. They're damaged in every one of my patients. Certainly, we're working in that direction to support mitochondria. I'm not against red light therapy. I'm not against any of these, what can I say? These more gentle treatments, these more non-invasive kinds of treatments. That's fine. I mean, it costs you a little money and effort to do that, right? So that's all. I mean, that's all fine. I don't have problems with those kinds of therapies. However, it's not something I pursue. I don't use red light therapy in my practice. I mean, if it's easy enough to get, it couldn't hurt. But is it going to help you a ton? I don't know. I mean, the mitochondria are definitely a vulnerable part, and they're damaged in everybody. It is something that needs to be addressed for everybody. I just don't use red light therapy to go there. Okay. Okay, so I am going to have to wrap it up. We are right on the hour, so I appreciate everybody showing up. If you have any questions or more comments, please leave those. Hit the like button and share this information. The more you share, the more it helps us get the information out there to more people, right? So Facebook will share it more and more. I mean, that's just kind of the way it works. If you want any more information, check out our YouTube channel. Check out Instagram. Again, like, subscribe, same thing. We're just trying to reach more and more people. And if you ever have any questions, my care team, right, my coaches and my care team are the most caring and understanding people you can ever talk to. So, if you go to the website or link to us on Facebook, you can have a conversation, kind of a free consultation with them, and they can talk things through and talk about what options are available for you. Okay. All my best. Take good care, and we'll talk again next time. Bye now.